The Tolkien Road, Episode 67, The Lord of the Rings, Lothlórien. Alright, go ahead. The Tolkien Road, 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 Hey there, fellow travelers. Welcome to the Tolkien Road, a long walk through the works and philosophy of J.R.R. Tolkien. On this episode, we continue through The Lord of the Rings with Book 2, Chapter 6, Lothlórien. Before we get started, why not hop on over to iTunes and leave the Tolkien Road a rating and feedback? It's a great way to show your support for the show and takes less than a minute. Thanks for listening, and enjoy. Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Tolkien Road. John here with Greta.
Hey, hey.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
Awesome.
Well, it's time for another episode of the Tolkien Road.
Can't believe it.
And we're talking about Book 2, Chapter 6 of Fellowship, Lothlórien.
Lothlórien. Good stuff.
I see you're still working on your haiku there.
Yep. Yeah. I'll get it done. I'll get it done.
With the one you put together?
Moment of confession, guys. The reason we moved haiku to the end of the show is so that I could write mine.
No, that's not
during
that's not what we did.
Oh, sorry. I thought that was part of the decision process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh
well.
So.
But yes, that is what I'm almost done.
Well, good. Because we got to talk about Chapter 6, Lothlórien. So
we're just gonna jump right in.
Yeah, I guess you'll just have to have a half haiku or something like that, if because we got to talk about this stuff. So let's start.
Okay, let's do it. It is kind of a long chapter, so I guess it's better not to start any rabbit trails or whatever.
Yeah. So Chapter 6, Lothlórien, starting out, the Fellowship find themselves leaderless. They find themselves without their fearless leader Gandalf.
Yes,
he has fallen into
sad.
shadow.
After
his duel with the Balrog.
Right.
He has fallen into shadow, unfortunately.
So, what does that mean? Fallen into shadow? Is that like purgatory?
I think it just means he's fallen into a dark place.
But he's still technically alive?
Well, no, they don't know.
They don't know.
They probably assume he's dead because he fell a really long way.
Okay.
So, can you maybe move your ice drink over a little further away from the recording device so that it doesn't pick up every single ice cube movement?
I think ice cube sounds can be very relaxing.
That's fine. But
yeah, I think our listeners would enjoy it.
A
little bit of ambient ice cube in the glass moving
the executive
around.
Producer of this podcast would prefer to make that decision.
I thought we were using that microphone. Sorry, I was confused.
We're using two different. We have a backup just in case just in case one fails on us. We don't have to spend an hour blabbing on about Chapter 6 and then it's like, oh, it didn't work. Yeah, it hasn't happened to us yet, but I'm always paranoid it is. I'm always like, get to the end of an episode and I'm like, whew, do I have to go back and do that all over again?
I'm glad that we don't have to do a redo.
It's like, it's like that feeling you have when, it would be like that feeling you have when you're like on a phone call with somebody and, the connection's not great and you like spend, you like start saying something for two,
and then you like realize it was like this long silence and they're not responding.
And you don't hear a response from them and you're like, oh, did I say something that just sounded really stupid or offended them? And then you realize they're just not on the phone anymore.
Right. They hung up on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, or there's
the connection dropped. I know.
But think about that feeling times 30.
Right.
Or times 60.
And just like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's smart. It's smart that we have two going. I'll try not to spill my iced coffee on our backup.
All right.
Lothlórien.
If you're going to spill your iced coffee somewhere, just don't
spill it on you.
No.
If you're going to spew into this.
It's weird how we always seem to come back to Wayne's World references, especially because we when we first started the podcast, we were kind of jokingly referring to ourselves as the Wayne's World of Tolkien podcast. Mm-hmm. And
wait, that was a joke?
Kind of, not really.
Oh, I didn't think it was a joke.
Well, not really, but
okay. Sort of, kind of, a little bit. All right.
I
dig it.
It was and it wasn't.
Okay.
You know?
That makes complete sense.
Way.
Moving on.
Way.
Way.
Well, but I also had the knot. You know, I threw in the knot earlier in the episode. You know the.
Oh, did you? I missed that.
That was a good idea.
Oh, I missed. I'm sorry. I was.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, so they're leaderless now because Gandalf has fallen into shadow. And Aragorn basically decides, you know what? We're going to continue on the road that he had set out for us.
Do they have another option at this point?
Unless
they're going to turn back and go back through Moria.
I guess they could have decided not to go to Lothlórien.
What, just like on a different way?
Well, yeah, because they're on the other side of the mountains now, right? So, you know, I guess technically speaking, they could have decided, because basically very few of them know anything about Lothlórien, right?
Right.
For Boromir, we're going to find out it's actually he's pretty skeptical about it.
He's not excited about it.
Gimli, you know, because he's a dwarf, is not exactly welcome there at first.
Right. Right. I see.
So there are other options
routes
they could take.
Okay. Yeah. That would still have gotten them to their destination.
Yeah.
Okay.
They decided to continue on the road they were going, and so, or the road that Gandalf had marked out for them.
Right.
The first thing they come upon, though, is this Mirror. Very interesting little lake out of which one of the rivers that surrounds Lothlorien proceeds.
Right.
And the interesting history of Mirror is that it's apparently where Durin, who was, you know, we talked about him a little bit last time. He was like the original. He was like the original dwarf lord.
Right.
The greatest of the dwarves. And he had actually, before he founded Moria, he had come and seen, you know, he was kind of searching for where he should go, and he found this lake and looked in it and saw the stars in the reflection above his head, and so, you know, he said this is his crown.
Right. Oh,
so this was a sign to him that he was supposed to build here.
Got it. Okay.
So Gimli, being a good dwarf, wants to look upon it. And here's what it says. Before the standing stone, Gimli halted and looked up. It was cracked and weather-worn, and the faint runes upon its side could not be read. This pillar marks the spot where Durin first looked in the mirror, said the dwarf. Let us look ourselves at once ere we go. They stooped over the dark water. At first they could see nothing. Then slowly they saw the forms of the encircling mountains mirrored in a profound blue, and the peaks were like plumes of white flame above them. Beyond there was a space of sky. There, like jewels sunk in the deep, shone glinting stars, though sunlight was in the sky above. Of their own stooping forms no shadow could be seen. O Caladhrim, fair and wonderful, said Gimli. There lies the crown of Durin till he wakes. Farewell. He bowed and turned away and hastened back up the green sward to the road beyond. What did you see? Said Pippin to Sam, but Sam was too deep in thought to answer. I feel like Sam has a lot of those moments in the next couple of chapters. And it's funny how he always refers to Sam and, like, you know, what Sam is thinking is kind of mysterious. But anyway, I digress. That wasn't really the point. So, I mean, this is just a really interesting lake because there's sunlight in the sky above, but when they look in the lake, they see the stars that you can't see just looking at the sky. Right.
Or their own reflections.
Right.
Yeah. That's mysterious.
It's I don't know. It just
but this
goes.
Is not in Lothlórien. They haven't gotten to Lothlórien yet, right?
No, they haven't. But it is between Lothlórien and Moria, where you know this ancient kingdom was. And at one point, the dwarves and the elves of Lothlórien were on better terms, right? And there was even some kind of trade because that was the road between Lothlórien and then the Holland on the other side of the Misty Mountains, right? Where they had entered in on the west side of the to Moria, right?
Yes.
So it was Moria was like this dwarvish bridge between two elvish kingdoms. Once upon a time. So once upon a time they were a little friendlier.
Yes.
And I was just thinking, like, it goes to show that, like, the dwarves are not like you can. I think you can kind of get this image of the dwarves that they aren't a great people themselves, or they didn't have an investment in beauty and that kind of thing. But just because they are kind of wandering along, but this just goes to show that they had their own kind of magic and great lore that associated with their own history. It's just another piece of that.
Yes. Well, and while it pales in comparison to the elves, lore and magic and whatever, it's still there.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder if this was some kind of who left this there for them, like who made this lake so that it would reflect the stars, and Durin would find this. Was it Aule, or was it were these ancient dwarves that made this, that somehow hallowed this lake? And we're going to talk. We'll be talking a little bit more about the magic of the elves and what that exactly means too. But the good magic and bad magic kind of dichotomy that Tolkien explored and some of this stuff.
Yes.
All right. Well, any other thoughts on the vision in the mirror?
No, it's definitely mysterious though.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about its origins, but that's a fun thing to think about.
Yeah. Well, when you see a lake that has that kind of strange properties,
it's obviously,
you're like, what's going on here?
Yeah, it's definitely unusual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Moving along, so they continue on their journey to Lothlórien, and Frodo and Sam are, of course, so Aragorn and the rest of the Fellowship are a little bit wary of the fact that orcs might be following them, right?
Right.
Because they just barely escaped, and it's probably not going to be long until the orcs figure out how to get on their trail, even though they couldn't follow them directly because the bridge of Khazad-dûm collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
They're still going to figure out some way to get to the other side and follow them. So they're moving along a little fast for the hobbits, and at one point they have to slow down, and Aragorn has to attend to Frodo, and he wants to give him some more of the Athelas in order to help his wound, because they assume that he got wounded, pretty badly when he was attacked by the
the orc, or
the orc lord,
whatever.
Yeah, the orc captain. And so it says, Aragorn says, "We must have a look and see what the hammer and the anvil have done to you. I still marvel that you are alive at all." Gently he stripped off Frodo's old jacket and worn tunic and gave a gasp of wonder. Then he laughed. The silver corselet shimmered before his eyes like the light upon a rippling sea. Carefully he took it off and held it up, and the gems on it glittered like stars, and the sound of the shaken rings was like the tinkle of rain in a pool. "Look, my friends," he called. "Here's a pretty hobbit skin to wrap an elven princeling in. If it were known that hobbits had such hides, all the hunters of Middle-earth would be riding to the Shire." "And all the arrows of all the hunters in the world would be in vain," said Gimli, gazing at the mail in wonder. "It is a mithril coat. Mithril. I have never seen or heard tell of one so fair. Is this the coat that Gandalf spoke of? Then he undervalued it, but it was well given." So this is the reveal that Frodo, was wearing the mithril the whole time, and that was why he was spared.
Why do you think he was so... It says he was reluctant to have his garments touched. Like, he obviously didn't want them to know about the mithril.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is? Do you think he'd get in trouble for having it? Or, like, would they think he was being deceitful? Or did he kind of want people to think he was just like this superhuman hobbit that, that couldn't be wounded? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, he obviously did not want them to discover this, and I'm wondering why.
That's a good question. I hadn't thought about that. That's a really good question. I'm trying to think back if there's a reason given that might be given. I mean, maybe it's just because it is a valuable gift.
He just didn't want...
It's kind of like the ring. The more people that know about it, the more you're kind of put in danger. It's like, you're going to walk down the street of, a big city and be like, "Hey, look at all my money," just like, waving your money around, flaunting it. I mean, you put yourself at risk,
That's true.
It's like, why? Even among good company, you do that, because you never know what kind of secret, what kind of, even just like temptation that's going to arouse in a otherwise good person,
They'd be drawn to it. Which is why whenever we win the lottery, I'm going to refuse to have my name put on TV.
Yeah, well.
Same kind of difference, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I was a little...
I'm glad we're clear on that, by the way. Yeah. I've been wondering.
You were wondering if I would let them put us on TV.
I lie awake at night sometimes, and I'm like, Lord, what if we win the lottery? What is Greta going to do?
I'm not going to tell anybody about it. It'll be a secret, huge secret.
Maybe we have already won the lottery.
And we just don't know it. Because it's a secret.
Maybe we have.
Or maybe you don't know about it, but I do.
That would be messed up.
Maybe. Maybe not. Hey, you gotta...
I know that wouldn't be true, though, because you're not very good at keeping secrets.
Whatever. But I want to give a shout out to Sam here.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was obviously wounded worse than Frodo in his fight. Yes.
Yeah.
But he never complained. Like, he never said anything like, hey, slow down, I'm hurt, I need help. He just kept trudging along, like one foot in front of the other. And it said his head felt light, and he was obviously getting pretty sick. Mm-hmm. But he never complained. Yeah. Never. It finally took, was it Legolas saying something to Aragorn eventually? Like, the hobbits, I think they need some help.
Yeah.
But if it weren't for that, who knows? They might have never said anything.
They might not have.
So anyway, I just think this is obviously, shows what a hardy, strong, determined folk these hobbits are.
Yes, indeed.
And that they're willing to put and they knew that if they stopped, they could potentially be putting their group at risk. And so they were just dug deep and kept forging ahead despite. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's a good point. Shout outs to Sam are always welcome. Mm-hmm. He's the, he's awesome. In a way, I think we may have talked about this a little bit, but in a way, you can make the argument that Sam is really the main protagonist of the whole story, Mm-hmm. Even though Frodo obviously gets center stage. And if anything, I think you can make a pretty strong argument that they're equals,
Co-protagonists.
Yeah, co-protagonists in the story.
I would agree with that.
Just because, so often Tolkien does kind of do these little asides to how Sam was viewing all this. Mm-hmm.
I think Tolkien really likes Sam.
He does, and I think, it's interesting, hopefully we'll get a chance to talk more about Tolkien's experiences in World War I, but, he has some really beautiful sentiment towards, and in a couple of his letters towards where the character of Sam came from, and in the British society that Tolkien grew up in, there was a lot of like that kind of different class, like it was a very clear class divides and that kind of thing. It was starting to change some, but there was the clear class divide between like the aristocracy, the lords and the ladies and all of that, and then like kind of the lower classes, right? And Sam would have been one of the lower classes. You kind of think of, but he would have been like, if making a Downton Abbey reference here, if like Frodo and Bilbo were like Lord Grantham, Sam would have been like Carson, right? He would have been this very loyal, like you not like looking at the lords and the ladies in like a despising, like you think you're better than me kind of manner, but in a very like,
it's a servant role.
I'm kind of fulfilled in my state of life, and this is what I find deep meaning in what I do here. Right. Right. But Tolkien also refers to a whole lot to in different letters he refers to like because Tolkien was an officer. Right.
Yes.
And because he had a degree and everything like that. He wasn't an aristocrat, but he came from kind of a higher middle class kind of background, and but he refers a lot to like the average foot soldiers, in World War I, and how much admiration he had for so many of them, who were. So
it's kind of like the relationship between Sam and Frodo. Like Frodo's like an officer, and Sam's like a
Sam
soldier.
He's just determined to do his duty. It's the good he understands and knows, and he's determined to do it well. And I think we live in a kind of a cynical time that can tend to look down on that, but I think it's beautiful.
There's a lot to be said for loyalty.
Yeah.
And for being willing to do that dirty work, so to speak, with a good attitude and dignity.
Anyway. Yeah. Good shout out for Sam.
Thanks, you.
So they're continuing on. They stop a little bit and they continue on. They stop to sleep, and Frodo has this kind of feeling that they're being watched or followed.
Right.
He looks at Sting, and the blade was dull, yet he had heard something, or thought he had. As soon as the shadows had fallen about them and the road behind was dim, He had heard again the quick patter of feet. Even now he heard it. He turned swiftly. There were 2 tiny gleams of light behind, or for a moment he thought he saw them, but at once they slipped aside and vanished. "What is it?" said the dwarf. "I don't know," answered Frodo. "I thought I heard feet, and I thought I saw a light, like eyes. I have thought so often since we first entered Moria." So, Frodo for some time now has been feeling like there's something or somebody following them.
Right.
And, he always refers back to this, like, patter of feet and these 2, like, little gleams of light.
Yeah, like glowing yellow stones.
So that continues here. Of course, it's not too much longer until we find out that that's Gollum.
Right.
Trying to come upon them.
Because he wants the ring.
He wants it, precious.
My precious.
Yeah. So, I wanted to read a little bit too about their discussion of Lothlórien before they get there. Because different members of the party have different thoughts on Lothlórien.
Right. Yep.
So, why don't we just start right here, like at this, the night wind blew chill, and let's just read this whole section about their discussion of Lothlórien.
Okay.
Are you there? So we'll just go back and forth. So I'll start out with the first paragraph, and we'll just go back and forth on paragraphs, okay?
Okay.
The night wind blew chill up the valley to meet them. Before them a wide grey shadow loomed, and they heard an endless rustle of leaves like poplars in the breeze.
"Lothlórien!" cried Legolas. "Lothlórien! We have come to the eaves of the Golden Wood. Alas, that it is winter."
Under the night the trees stood tall before them, arched over the road and stream that ran suddenly beneath their spreading boughs. In the dim light of the stars their stems were grey, and their quivering leaves a hint of fallow gold.
"Lothlórien!" cried Aragorn. "Glad I am to hear again the wind in the trees. We are still more than 5... Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat.
Yeah, you sounded like Kermit.
I did sound like... Who knew? Aragorn sounded like Kermit. Alright, take 2. Here we go. "Lothlórien!" cried Aragorn. "Glad am I to hear again the wind in the trees. We are still little more than 5 leagues from the gates, but we can go no further. Here, let us hope that the virtue of the elves will keep us tonight from the peril that comes behind."
"If elves indeed still dwell here in the darkening world," said Gimli.
"It is long since any of my own folk journeyed hither back to the land whence we wandered in ages long ago," said Legolas. "But we hear that Lórien is not yet deserted, for there is a secret power here that holds evil from the land. Nevertheless, its folk are seldom seen, and maybe they dwell now deep in the woods and far from the northern border."
"Indeed, deep in the wood they dwell," said Aragorn, and sighed as if some memory stirred in him. "We must fend for ourselves tonight. We will go forward a short way until the trees are all about us, and then we will turn aside from the path and seek a place to rest in."
He stepped forward, but Boromir stood irresolute and did not follow. "Is there no other way?" he said.
"What other fairer way would you desire?" said Aragorn.
"A plain road, though it led through a hedge of swords," said Boromir. "By strange paths has this company been led, and so far to evil fortune. Against my will we passed under the shades of Moria to our loss. And now we must enter the Golden Wood, you say. But of that perilous land we have heard in Gondor, and it is said that few come out who once go in. And of that few none have escaped unscathed."
"Say not unscathed, but if you say unchanged, then maybe you will speak the truth," said Aragorn. "But lore wanes in Gondor, Boromir. If in the city of those who once were wise they now speak evil of Lothlórien. Believe what you will, there is no other way for us, unless you would go back to Moria Gate, or scale the pathless mountains, or swim the great river all alone."
"Then lead on," said Boromir, "but it is perilous."
"Perilous indeed," said Aragorn, "fair and perilous. But only evil need fear it, or those who bring some evil with them. Follow me." So, I find it really interesting, that Boromir has this reaction to Lothlórien, and I think it further goes to show, like, the divide that exists in the world for the free peoples, of Middle Earth, right?
Yes.
Of men and of dwarves and of elves. There's no connection. There's no connectedness between them, really. There's no, like, there once may have been, right?
Yeah, they're kind of each living in their own little bubbles, and
yeah.
very, like their opinions and their outlook on the world is very much shaped by, or their outlook on the other places of Middle Earth is very much shaped by people that, by their own people.
Mm-hmm.
Like they haven't gotten out and experienced it for themselves.
Right, and there's something that seems very familiar about this with that seems to ring true with like the world we find ourselves in today, and just where there's so much disconnectedness, where once there was kind of a connectedness between lots of different regions, between different countries, between different peoples. We live in a time where it seems like people are just so much more suspicious of one another, and things that used to be like, oh, this is this shining wonderful place, now it's like people that aren't from there look on it with suspicion and hear evil things about it. And this applies in so many ways. I'm really trying not to be too because this is Tolkien, I'm trying not to be too Tolkien was making some kind of reference to this, to this specific thing. But I think it's more about the dynamic, of different periods of time, how where once the elf friends, the Yadain, right, had ruled over Arnor in the north and Gondor in the south, and it had been this massive kind of kingdom of men, that had kept the peace in this area. Now there's just this Gondor is like this isolated little region, and there's no Arnor in the north, and there's still population in different places,
right?
But it's all disconnected, and there's no sense of unity. It's all, and when there's no sense of unity, there's just this rising suspicion.
Yeah.
You have reason to be suspicious more than anything else.
Right. Right. I wonder if this is, so I feel like I remember from one of our other discussions of something or other that Tolkien wrote, that he was very much, the whole industrial movement and age was not, he was not a fan.
Oh, no.
Of all that. So I kind of wonder, because what you were saying, it makes me think about, how just, I feel like this could be a way of him, maybe sharing his feelings on that. Because really, I think a big reason that we are so disconnected in this day and age, and even, obviously, Middle Earth and where we are now, two totally different things. But I think a big part of it is due to the technological advances that we've had. And it is kind of ironic because you have things like social media and Twitter and Facebook and stuff to bring people together and help them connect. But instead of them actually going out and grabbing a cup of coffee together, they're just, hanging out, they're just private messaging each other on Facebook. And you know what I'm saying? It's kind of, or, instead of actually traveling to Asia or Australia or whatever, you just, take virtual tours on the internet. And so, I don't know, that just kind of made me think if that's somehow underlying,
Well, I mean, you know how I feel about, we both feel about, social media just in general. I mean, I view it as something, that could be used for a really great thing, for dialogue between different people. And sometimes that may happen, but it's increasingly it just seems to factionalize people. There's no actual there's very little actual discussion of differing ideas, of competing ideas even, to arrive at it, and if you can't have that, then you're perpetually in a power struggle. You're perpetually, it's okay, who's going to win the political battle and ascend and hold power for a short period of time until the other people get fed up with them and go to this other person, instead of using that to arrive at the truth, right? What is the truth, right? Through dialogue, come, let us reason together, right? And it's funny with Facebook, or Twitter or whatever, as much as that can be a means of connecting with people, it can also be a way of just assuming that that's what that person said on social media, and therefore I know enough about them to judge them.
Exactly. Exactly.
And and to like, you know, and I mean really to judge them, like really to be like, you're a horrible person and I hate you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Instead of being willing to go kind of that extra mile to say, I'm going to suspend, like, even though you might have said something that I disagree with or that, you know, I strongly disagree with, I'm not going to judge you. Like, I you know, I will say I disagree with that and here's why, but you don't see that. Like, but I still care about you as a person, right? And I still know there's plenty of goodness in you as a person. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And even though I think you might be misguided in these ways, I can see that the reason you've chosen these things that I disagree with are because you want some greater good out of it, right? And for all I know, I could be misguided too, and I need you. We need to have dialogue. I want other people to have dialogue with. So anyway, yeah, it is kind of tragic, and I see that dynamic going on here, you know, in kind of a little snippet of it with Boromir and the way he knows just enough about Lothlórien to feel like he's scared of them and doesn't want anything to do with them. Right.
Exactly. And it's just that, you know, it feeds these whole preconceived notions and misconceptions when you don't know the full story, you just know enough. And it's not it's not your own preconceived, I mean, it's not your own personal experience with it. It's what you've heard from who knows where else, but you've taken it on as it's your own. And that can be dangerous. Yeah. So, but I can kind of relate to Boromir here, though, too. I mean, to be quite honest. I mean, you know, there's certainly places that I've heard about in the world that I'd be like, oh, there's no way I'm going there, right? Yeah. Even though it might be perfectly fine and wonderful. Right. So, yeah, I mean, I'm glad that he's, you know, that he's able to kind of put aside his kind of prejudices. Yeah. And do what's, you know, trust Aragorn and his leadership. But I know it's still a, you know, I can get where he's coming from. Yeah, yeah. I think we all can.
Well, and all that being said, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
Yeah, do that too.
All right. So, so as they're coming closer to Lothlórien, they are crossing the river Nimrodel. And this reminds Legolas of a song about a maiden named Nimrodel, who was an actual elvish maiden who lived in Lothlórien. Yes. And so, as we usually do, I thought we'd read the poem.
All right. Yeah. Lots of reading in this episode.
Yeah, well, it's good stuff.
It is good stuff.
All right. I'll start out, and then we'll just go back and forth between the stanzas. Okay. An elven maid there was of old, a shining star by day. Her mantle white was hemmed with gold, her shoes of silver gray.
A star was bound upon her brows, a light was on her hair, as sun upon the golden boughs, and Lorien the fair.
Her hair was long, her limbs were white, and fair she was and free, and in the wind she went as light as leaf of linden tree.
Beside the falls of Nimrodel. Did I say that right? Mm-hmm. Okay. But beside the falls of Nimrodel, by water clear and cool, her voice as falling silver fell into the shining pool.
Where now she wanders, none can tell, in sunlight or in shade, for lost of yore was Nimrodel, and in the mountain strayed.
The elven ship in haven gray, beneath the mountain lee, awaited her for many a day, beside the roaring sea.
A wind by night in northern lands arose, and loud it cried, and drove the ship from elven strands across the streaming tide.
When dawn came dim, the land was lost, the mountains sinking gray, beyond the heaving waves that tossed their plumes of blinding spray.
Amroth beheld the fading shore, now low beyond the swell, and cursed the faithless ship that bore him far from Nimrodel.
Of old he was an elven king, a lord of tree and glen, when golden were the boughs in spring, and fair Lothlórien.
From helm to sea they saw him leap, as arrow from the string, and dive into the water deep, as mew upon the wing.
The wind was in his flowing hair, the foam about him shone. Afar they saw him, strong and fair, go riding like a swan.
But from the west has come no word, and on the hither shore no tidings elven folk have heard of Amroth evermore. So I read a little bit about the background on this story, and it's interesting, I guess. So these were actually elvish figures that lived in Lothlórien, Amroth and Nimrodel were elvish figures that lived in Lothlorien, about 2,000 years before the story takes place, right?
Okay.
And
we didn't read about them in the Silmarillion.
Actually, it may not be that. Actually, it's about 1,000 years, I think, before.
Okay.
No, they're not in the Silmarillion. This is in the Third Age. It's just an earlier part of the Third Age.
Okay.
And I guess Nimrodel was not very fond of like the Noldor and the Sindar who came to Lothlorien, and she was like a one of the elves from back east, right? She was not one of the elves that had made the journey to. She was not of the peoples that had made the journey to the Blessed Realm in the First Age or before the First Age.
Okay.
Anyway, when Durin's Bane awoke, I think she became frightened by that, or she was like, I'm leaving. And Amroth had basically fallen for her, and so they decided they were going to go journey down to the shores, the havens of Belfalos, which are way down south. Yeah, like down here.
Okay.
And they were gonna take a ship over to the Blessed Realm.
Okay.
And so I guess at some point their party got split up. Nimrodel and Amroth got separated, and Amroth made it to the ship, and Nimrodel never made it. So no one knows what happened to her finally. So, so that's kind of the background of the story.
Wow,
yeah.
Sad.
As many of the Elvish songs are,
Yeah.
Songs and stories are. So.
This reminded me a little bit. I know the story's different, but it reminded me a little bit of. Just as I was reading it, the Lorelei, or the Pogues.
Oh right, yeah.
And that's obviously it's a very different type of story, but just that whole idea of, unrequited love and, the separation of, just that unfulfilled destiny between two lovers.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I don't know if there's a connection, because that's like an ancient sort of, or it's a European folklore, right? Northern European folklore. So
it's German.
They might have some kind of connection to this with Tolkien, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. No, it just brought it to my mind.
Yeah. Good reference.
Thanks. It's a beautiful song too.
It is a good song.
Remember, I wanted to name our daughter Lorelei.
Lorelei, yep.
But I'm glad that you didn't let me because it's pretty depressing. Once you understand, as beautiful a name as it is, the song is kind of depressing. Yeah,
well, that's a good
just
song.
like this tale. Oh, it's a great song. It's a great song. Yeah, this is a beautiful song too. I wish I wish there was a way to know the tunes. Do you think Tolkien had tunes in his mind when he wrote these?
I think he probably did. I know different musicians have put these.
Oh, have they?
To music, and I'm not sure. I think there's some evidence of like some of the stuff that Tolkien wrote has tunes associated with it that we know of, but not much. But yeah, that would be great, wouldn't it?
It would be awesome. It's like a soundtrack.
Yeah.
Like a legit, not like the movie soundtrack,
right?
But like just a soundtrack to the books. Mm-hmm. That would be cool.
It's interesting to think about what the Elvish music would sound like too.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of think of.
I think it'd be very angelic.
Yeah, I think of like a spirited sort of a version of almost like chant, like a more spirited kind of version of chant. Like Gregorian chant or something like that.
I think there would definitely be harps involved.
Probably, yeah. Interesting discussion. If anybody knows of any recordings of somebody who's put the song of Nimrodel to music, let us know.
Yeah, please. That'd be awesome.
So, moving along, next they're kind of on the edge of the forest now of Lothlórien,
right?
And at this point, they come across some of the elves of Lothlórien.
Right.
And Legolas goes to meet with them, and I like the little description of this tree house. I wanted to read that. So Legolas, they're up in the trees. These other elves are up in the trees. And it says, "Out of the shadows a ladder was let down. It was made of rope, silver gray and glimmering in the dark. And though it looked slender, it proved strong enough to bear many men. Legolas ran lightly up, and Frodo followed slowly. Behind came Sam, trying not to breathe loudly. The branches of the Malorn tree grew out nearly straight from the trunk, and then swept upward. But near the top, the main stem divided into a crown of many boughs, and among these they found that there had been built a wooden platform, or flet, as such things were called in those days. The elves called it a talon. It was reached by a round hole in the center, through which the ladder passed." So it's kind of a cool little image of the treehouse. I drew a little picture of, as I understand it, what it would look like right there.
Okay.
And I think, I'm going to pull this out. So I've got my little Tolkien art book here by the artistry of J.R.R. Tolkien, artist and illustrator by Wayne Hammond and Christina Skull, which we've referenced a couple of times here on the podcast. But if you look, bless you.
Thank you. Ugh.
There was I thought there was a picture in here of it, but maybe I'm wrong. Of what one of these might look like. But basically, you can imagine it being just kind of like this, tall, slender trunk with the lower boughs, the lower branches, kind of going straight out from it.
Yeah.
And then they almost like symmetrically sort of like start to incline as they go up higher, and they increasingly incline as they go up higher, to the point where at the very top it forms this kind of like bunched up crown of branches and boughs, right?
Yes.
And that's where they build this house.
Okay.
Right.
It's not like a house that
it's more. I
was
like
gonna say it's not
platform.
like a house that we would think of, right? Because
Right.
I know at one point it talks about the fact that there's no railings,
Right?
Like there's no walls. They have like one screen that they can move to guard against the wind, but it's not a tree house that you would think of from your growing up years,
Right?
Right. It's just kind of like a flat. But it must be pretty large, because several of them sleep up there. Mm-hmm. So, but it's just like a platform, right? Almost like a stage in the sky. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I don't know, I drew a little picture of it in my book just so I could picture what it looked like. But
yeah.
It looks kind of nifty.
Yeah.
All right.
Very minimalist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. I mean, I think it's one of the more functional elf constructed things, it's just supposed to be kind of almost like a guard tower, I think, in this case.
Okay.
But.
Almost like a hunt, I don't hunt, but people that they build like those little
what do they call those things?
What do they call those?
I can't remember, but it's like a perch.
Yeah, like a perch that they can climb up on to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it turns out that the elves up here are Haldir and two others, his brothers Rumil and Orofin.
Right.
Haldir speaks the common language pretty well. Rumil and Orofin do not. Haldir, does make a pretty. He's in the movie in a couple of different scenes. He shows up in a couple of different ways there. Okay. But Haldir is their guide through the outer parts of Lothlórien. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he reacts poorly to the fact that there's a dwarf with them.
Yeah, I think Legolas suspected that because he didn't mention the fact initially that they had a dwarf with them.
Yeah.
It took Haldir being like, wait, you said there was 8, you've only mentioned 7.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, oh, oops, I forgot to mention, sorry, the 8th is a dwarf.
Yeah, right. So it comes later that they have to, to take Gimli all the way in. They're demanding that he be blindfolded.
Yes. I thought that whole exchange was funny.
And we'll come back to that in a moment. But as they sleep, so they fall asleep on this platform.
Yeah.
And they wake up in the middle of the night, and one of the elves shouts up. He says, "Yerk," which is orc.
Was that how you say that? I was wondering how you would say that
Yerk.
word.
That's how I think you say it.
If only Gabriel was here. He would know.
That's right. I think that's a pretty good job. Yerk. So apparently orc is an orc in pretty much any language.
Right.
So.
Right. It just sounds a little bit prettier in the elven tongue.
Right. So it's true there are orcs that are apparently on their trail but don't figure out. So they just kind of keep an eye on the orcs to make sure that there's and the elves kind of because there's like 100 orcs apparently,
right, and they can't.
Yeah,
they wouldn't be able to go against them.
Right, and so they cleverly kind of do work their little elvish trickery and throw their voices so that they kind of lead them on away from this area.
Right. Like we'll let the elves up the road deal with them.
But as Frodo is left, kind of left not as well guarded while the orcs are being pursued, he gets this sense again that something is looking for him.
Right. Right. He even hears like something climbing the tree, doesn't he?
Yeah. He drew out Sting. It flashed and glittered like a blue flame because of the orcs, and then slowly faded again and grew dull. In spite of the fading of his sword, the feeling of immediate danger did not leave Frodo. Rather, it grew stronger. He got up and crawled to the opening and peered down. He was almost certain that he could hear stealthy movements at the tree's foot far below. Not elves, for the woodland folk were altogether noiseless in their movements. Then he heard faintly a sound like sniffing, and something seemed to be scrabbling on the bark of the tree trunk. He stared down into the dark, holding his breath. Something was now climbing slowly, and its breath came like a soft hissing through closed teeth. Then coming up, close to the stem, Frodo saw two pale eyes. They stopped and gazed upward, unwinking. Suddenly they turned away, and a shadowy figure slipped around the trunk of the tree and vanished. Immediately afterwards, Haldir came climbing swiftly up through the branches. There was something in this tree that I have never seen before, he said. It was not an orc. It fled as soon as I touched the tree stem. It seemed to be wary and to have some skill in trees, or I might have thought that it was one of you hobbits. I did not shoot, for I dared not arouse any cries. We cannot risk battle. So, again, Gollum, he's following along, and he's just trying to inch closer and closer to Frodo so that he can get the ring.
Right, right.
So, this little lurker in the shadows. But they're safe for now. They continue on into the heart of the forest. At one point, they decide they have to wear their blindfolds.
Right.
And when Gimli hears that the deal is that he has to wear a blindfold, he revolts at this and refuses to wear it. Mm-hmm. And at that point, Aragorn, I think, makes a pretty good leader move, and he says, "Well, then we'll all wear blindfolds."
Right. Right.
If we can't reach, I thought this was a pretty good
that was really
compromise.
Smart. Yeah, that was
on Aragorn's
well
part.
handled. Yeah, right. Absolutely.
A lesser leader might have, put up a fight and said like, well, hold on, he's one of my guys, if you won't, or told him that he just had to follow and like forced him to, or whatever. And Aragorn, I think, wisely sees like, okay, what's the goal here? Well, we need to get, we need to continue on with our journey, and this is the only way we can go is forward. So we'll all put on blindfolds. Yeah. And then the dwarf won't feel like he's
being singled out.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that was smart. He did a good job of diffusing it, because this whole thing, like this whole standoff between Gimli and the dwarves, and especially Legolas, like really escalated quickly. Mm-hmm. I mean, Gimli had his axe out, and Legolas had his bow, and it's like, ooh, yikes. That could have gotten ugly real quick. Mm-hmm. So yeah, good move on Aragorn's part.
Yeah, indeed. So I wanted to call out too, there's this little bit where Legolas and Haldir have an exchange shortly thereafter. Gimli says, "A merry troop of fools we shall look. Will Haldir lead us all in a string like many blind beggars with one dog? But I will be content if only Legolas here shares my blindness." "I am an elf and a kinsman here," said Legolas, becoming angry in his turn. "Now let us cry, a plague on the stiff necks of elves," said Aragorn. "But the company shall all fare alike. Come, blind our eyes, Haldir." "I shall claim full amends for every fall and stub toe if you do not lead us well," said Gimli, as they bound a cloth about his eyes. So even in this, people are still like kind of on edge. They're like, stupid dwarves, stupid elves kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
And Haldir says, "You will have no claim. I shall lead you well, and the paths are smooth and straight." And Legolas says, "Alas, for the folly of these days. Hear all the enemies of the one enemy, and yet I must walk blind, while the sun is merry in the woodland under leaves of gold." "Folly it may seem," said Haldir. "Indeed, in nothing is the power of the Dark Lord more clearly shown than in the estrangement that divides all those who still oppose him. Yet so little faith and trust do we find now in the world beyond Lothlórien, unless maybe in Rivendell, that we dare not by our own trust endanger our land. We live now upon an island amid many perils, and our hands are more often upon the bowstring than upon the harp." I think this is a. This is the story of humanity right here, right? Mm-hmm. Indeed, nothing is the power of the Dark Lord more clearly shown than in the estrangement that divides all those who still oppose him. Yep. Yep. And I know, like, at the end of the day, there's people who, you and I are Catholic. We kind of believe in this other sort of this greater reality that mm-hmm. surrounds the reality that we're in, right? Mm-hmm. And because of that, we believe in the unity, or we're idealists about the unity of the human race, right? That we should be united, right? That we should have each other's backs, that we should love one another. But we live in this world where we're not. We're so often at each other's throats, but at a large scale and on a small scale. True. Yeah. And I just think this is a great little quote from Haldir. And mm-hmm. Indeed, and nothing is the power of the Dark Lord more clearly shown than in the estrangement that divides all those who still oppose him. Sure. I mean, even if you don't, like, I feel like it's, for, even if you're an atheist who doesn't believe in God or believe in anything supernatural, or just an atheist materialist who believes, like, there's no such thing as the supernatural and that kind of thing, there still has to be this, it would seem there still has to be this feeling on the part of some of, like, why can't human beings, it's like the Rodney King thing, like, why can't we all just get along, right? Why can't we all just get along kind of thing, right? Yeah. Why can't we? What is it about us that makes it so difficult for us to be united? Yeah. I mean, you see it all around you. It's a big part of people's responses to different injustices they see, is to commit another injustice. Yeah. In the name of righting the first injustice. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I think this is my favorite quote in the chapter. Indeed, is nothing, and nothing is the power of the Dark Lord more clearly shown than the estrangement that divides all those who still oppose him. Well, it just seems like there's something else going on in the world, that causes us all to be divided.
There has to be.
Manipulated.
There has to be. I mean, it's just like that. That famous was Abraham Lincoln quote, right? The house divided against itself cannot stand. I mean, it's like we're all united in this common.
Well, I think he was quoting. Purpose. I think he was quoting Christ, wasn't he, when he said that? Or maybe he was paraphrasing something in the Gospels. Yeah.
I remember reading it in history, but it's he probably was.
I mean, I'm just saying. Go ahead. You're saying.
No, I was just gonna say that that we all have so much in common. Like, mm-hmm. if you just think about it, like, we're all human beings. Like, we've all been put on this earth for a purpose, and we all, while we maybe have different ways of going about it, like, most of us have the same goal and purpose in life, right? Which is to survive and to do good, to leave a legacy. Mm-hmm. And so but that for some reason isn't enough to keep all that backbiting and meanness at bay. You know, it's but it's just that innate human, it's the fall. It's really the curse of the fall, and I know it's very kind of ironic when you think about it.
I mean, Tolkien was a Catholic, and so he very much attributes it to that. Right. Here, this is I think this is something he put in there, not as a commentary, but as just something he recognizes. Mm-hmm. This is where he gets very deep about kind of reflective on the nature of things. Right. Why is there so much conflict and so much distrust? This chapter is very much. It's interesting that they're traveling to this little earthly paradise, this little earthly island haven, almost in the middle of so much strife. Mm-hmm. But this chapter calls out so many of the things that divide them as their journey. Yeah. It's like, look how divided we're supposed to be. This fellowship, mm-hmm. Of free peoples, and we're still so divided.
Well, I remember talking about that when we were reading the Silmarillion about Melkor. Like, that was his. Mm-hmm. That was his game plan, right? Was to just sow these seeds of distrust and, to divide families, to divide races, to turn friends into enemies. Like, that was his plan. Mm-hmm. Because once you've done that, like, there's no foundation. Right. There's nothing left.
Yeah. Well, right on.
Yeah, now that I'm depressed and want to go have a drink.
Yeah.
Forget about all the problems in our world.
It's morning, so no drinking. Yeah.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere, dude. Come on.
Somewhere. How did I know you were going to say that? Okay. All right, so I also like, just after that, there's this conversation between Merry and Haldir. Haldir says, "Happy folk are hobbits to dwell near the shores of the sea," because over here in Lothlórien, they're far away from the sea, but the elves love the sea, right? They love the sound of the sea. They're drawn to it. "It is long indeed since any of my folk have looked on it, yet still we remember it in song. Tell me of these havens as we walk." And Merry's like, "I cannot. I've never seen them. I've never been outside of my own land before. And if I had known what the world outside was like, I don't think I should have had the heart to leave it." Haldir says,
he's honest.
Yeah. "Not even to see fair Lothlorien? The world is indeed full of peril, and in it there are many dark places, but still there is much that is fair. And though in all lands love is now mingled with grief, it grows perhaps the greater. Some there are among us who sing that the shadow will draw back and peace shall come again. Yet I do not believe that the world about us will ever again be as it was of old, or the light of the sun as it was aforetime. For the elves, I fear, it will prove at best a truce, in which they may pass to the sea unhindered, and leave Middle-earth forever. Alas for Lothlórien that I love. It would be a poor life in a land where no malorn grew. But if there are malorn trees beyond the great sea, none have reported it." So there's this recognition on the part of the elves, and the wiser elves especially, that that they're living in this time that's seeing their decline. That's kind of like the end of the elves in Middle-earth to a large degree.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that they have this little eschatology, and for themselves, it's all coming to an end.
Yeah.
This long time in this world. There's still some that sing of a new time when the shadow will draw back, but at the end of the day, it seems like they're just fighting this long defeat.
Yeah, in fact, maybe it's in the next chapter, but I know that word.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in the next chapter.
Have we come across that phrase before, the long defeat?
That's one. It's like a big Tolkien concept. Is long defeat,
long
right?
Defeat.
No, we're fighting this. That even in this world, he talks about like that. The forces of good seem to be fighting this long defeat.
Yeah.
Such
a depressing
now,
notion.
well, there's more to it than that. We'll talk about it. We may even do like a standalone episode on the long defeat at some point. Just to have more of an idea of like what Tolkien was talking about. Because it's not utterly depressing. That's not what he intends it to be. But there is hope associated with it. But it's a very important concept to him.
Okay.
Yeah. So, lastly, they arrive, they're getting closer to the heart of Lothlórien, and they start referring to how Lothlórien felt. I am jumping ahead a little here, just in case I wanted to share anything else. But it says, "The others cast themselves down upon the fragrant grass, but Frodo stood a while, still lost in wonder. It seemed to him that he had stepped through a high window that looked on a vanished world. A light was upon it for which his language had no name. All that he saw was shapely, but the shapes seemed at once clear-cut, as if they had been first conceived and drawn at the uncovering of his eyes, and ancient as if they had endured forever. He saw no color but those he knew, gold and white and blue and green, but they were fresh and poignant, as if he had at the moment first perceived them and made for them new names new and wonderful. In winter here no heart could mourn for summer or for spring. No blemish or sickness or deformity could be seen in anything that grew upon the earth. On the land of Lórien there was no stain." He turned and saw that Sam was now standing beside him, looking round with a puzzled expression, and rubbing his eyes as if he was not sure that he was awake. "It's sunlight and bright day right enough," he said. "I thought that elves were all for moon and stars, but this is more elvish than anything I ever heard tell of. I feel as if I was inside a song, if you take my meaning."
So they have their blindfolds off at this point.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah. They're finally, and so, they've almost like crossed this threshold into the true realm of the elves, right? And it's almost like a little pocket of what the Blessed Realm must be like. This little island of blessedness.
So why are they allowed to see this, but they weren't allowed to see...
They don't want them to see how to get there.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay. That makes sense.
It's kind of like when you watch those like murder detective shows when somebody gets thrown in a trunk.
Yes.
And the detectives are talking to them afterwards, and they're like, "Okay, well, what did you hear when you were in the trunk? Like, did it sound like you were going over a bridge, or did it sound like you were, you know, they ask all these questions to try and figure it out, right?
So just wanted them to be disoriented and not know where they were.
Yeah, not be able to retrace their steps. Yeah,
that makes sense. Okay.
They're careful. They're careful about the security for Lothlórien is high.
Yeah.
High security.
Yeah.
But I like, you know, I think Sam has the best thing to say about it, which he says, I feel as if I was inside a song.
Inside a song.
Which I love that because when you go back and you remember Aina Lindale, you know, that really all of creation is this song.
Yeah, it's the song.
Right.
Yeah.
But
it's like a glimpse, really, of what that, you know, of what it was all meant to be.
Yeah. And the elves have retained most of that, have retained that most of all. You know, so the further you journey into their world.
Because they're the children of the...
Yeah, the elder children of Ilútar.
the elder children of Ilútar, right.
And they're immortal, so they're able to kind of build up that culture around that idea. And they've spent time with the Valar.
Right.
You know, and with
So
some of
they've
the
experienced it firsthand, yeah.
So...
Yeah. I hadn't thought about the Aina Lindale connection. That's cool.
Yeah, that is a nifty little thing.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I wanted to call out in the chapter is Haldir had gone on and was now climbing to the high flet. As Frodo prepared to follow him, he laid his hand upon the tree beside the ladder. Never before had he been so suddenly and so keenly aware of the feel and texture of a tree's skin and of the life within it. He felt a delight in wood and the touch of it, neither as forester nor as carpenter. It was the delight of the living tree itself. So, again, I feel like they're at this, like their senses are heightened. You know, being here.
Yeah.
And Frodo puts his hand up to this tree, and he almost just like feels the life pulsing through it. You know, it's not like he's feeling this wood and like he's like, oh, this would make a really nice, you know, table or something like that. He's feeling it and just feeling like that this tree is alive.
It's a living thing.
Yeah.
Almost that it could potentially have a soul of its own.
Right.
Yeah. A lifeblood.
Yeah.
So when they climb this tree at the end of this chapter, they are able to see far. Right? I mean, he's able to kind of see all around him. So is this particular thing, that this tree that they climb, is it a special tree?
It must have some ability. I mean, it must be higher. I don't know how it's special, but
okay. Why does Haldir take him up there, you think? Just to kind of, because he goes up there with just Sam and Frodo, right? I'm not sure. Does it say? It says, well...
Oh, he just says, would it please you to climb with me up Cairn Amroth?
Yeah.
I think he's just welcoming him to being like, do you want to look at all this stuff?
Okay.
You know?
Just kind of get perspective and see where they've been and how far they've come.
But he looks south and he you know, sees the he kind of sees, at first he sees the rest of Lorien, and it's kind of pretty.
Yeah.
And then he keeps looking, and it's like, you know, things start getting darker and uglier, you know, the further on. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, yeah. He can actually see the light go out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting. Actually, the last thing to mention here, I think, is Aragorn's little, his words there. Arwen Vanimelda Namaride.
Oh, yeah. What does that mean?
I should have looked it up. I didn't look it up.
Well, obviously Arwen is a name.
Yeah. Well, let me see if I can... Well, Arwen is Arwen.
And he seems like when he says this, he's like in a reverie. I mean, right? He's like, he's somewhere else in his mind. Like he's having a vision or something. He's being transported to another place, another time, a memory.
Let's see here. Arwen, beautiful beloved, goodbye, is what somebody translated it as.
Beautiful beloved, goodbye.
Arwen, beautiful beloved, elven fair, farewell. That's interesting. Maybe he knows that they're on the edge of entering into this point of no return or something like that. I mean, those are kind of dooming, you know, words with doom in them.
Yeah. Yeah. They're very final. Very heartfelt, but yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of definitely pointing to something sad to come.
That's why Tolkien's such a good storyteller, is like, you know, those little, whether it's the Mirror and the whole history of that, the story of Nimrodel, I mean, even just what Aragorn is thinking here, we don't really know.
We don't know.
There's just this mystery with it. But you know Tolkien knew what he was thinking, or had some idea what he was thinking.
Right, but he wanted to give the reader the freedom to imagine it for themselves.
Now, he may come back later and we may gain insight from the rest of the story, but he doesn't always do that.
No, he doesn't. Which
I
cool.
love. I love too.
Because you can let your imagination run wild, and it can be what you want it to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
That freedom, right? That freedom of escape.
All right. Well, man, we took longer on that chapter than I thought we would.
It was a long chapter.
It is, but you know what time it is now, don't you?
Oh, is it? Could it be? Oh, yeah. It's time for some haiku.
Yes, it is.
Haiku
time for haiku.
Good thing I got mine done just in time.
Yeah.
Screw.
Yeah.
Dang, this song makes haiku feel so cool.
It does.
It really does.
Really captures the essence of haiku.
The essence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In musical form. All right.
A musical what?
Musical form. All right. Should the guests go first or us?
What did we do last time?
I don't know.
How about we go first?
Okay.
We play paper, rock. See, now you have me saying it wrong.
Rock,
paper, scissors, shoot. Darn it. Why do I always lose?
I think you're just programmed how to say darn it. As soon as you go rock, paper, scissors, shoot, darn it.
It's just all part of the game for me. Yep.
All right.
Well, you going first or am I going first?
Are you done with yours?
I am, yep.
All right. Why don't you go first?
All right. I wrote two. I like them both. But I'll read this one. Can we put the other one on the website?
Just read them both.
I'll read them both.
We don't have a ton for this episode.
Oh, so. Okay. All right. Well, here's my first one. Living in a song. And I'm sorry. I should preface this one by saying I cheated a little bit because I used something from this chapter and the next chapter.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Is that okay? Okay. Living in a song. Being away and at home. All at the same time.
Nice. I like it.
I love the way that Sam described. Like, I love that idea of being inside a song.
It's pretty sweet. Cool.
All right, and then here's my other one.
Wait, why don't you let me do one and then you can do your other one?
Oh, okay, sweet. All right, let's do it.
Leaderless brethren, tempted to despair, pressing forward, paradise found.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I like that. I was pretty proud of it when I put that one together.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my second one. Bewitched and bejeweled, a new land welcomes the eight. Elven paradise.
Nice.
So we both use paradise.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Almost paradise.
I'm knocking on heaven's door. Almost paradise. How could I ask for more?
That's right. How could we ask for more?
I feel that I can see forever in your eyes.
That's an awesome song.
Yeah, who sings that?
Let's see. I'm just looking it up. It's on the Footloose soundtrack. Well, it says Mike Reno, but I know there's a female voice in it too. It might be Bonnie Tyler.
How could we ask for more?
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
All right. Rob Fangman.
Rob
has a haiku for us.
Woohoo!
Silver gold Malorn, sweet voice of Nimrodel, fair Lothlórien.
I love it.
Awesome.
I love it.
Well done, Rob.
That encapsulates the chapter extremely well.
Mm-hmm.
Nicely done.
And then Josh.
He's back.
He is. He
Awesome.
apologized for not being on the one last week, I think.
I hope it was an extensive apology.
But I feel like, so let me say this too, Mary Grace, who's, pretty consistent.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get any from her before these, so I don't know why that was, but I don't think I did. I'm hoping I didn't miss them because I get the haiku from all these different sources.
Oh, you
So
just streamline that process, dude.
Well, I don't know. Maybe, but
Mary Grace, if you sent one and we missed it, we're sorry.
yeah.
And if we find it, we'll read it on the next episode.
There you go.
Okay.
Or on a later episode.
What about Lars?
Yeah, we didn't have anything from Lars this week. Again, maybe I lost it somewhere, but I don't think I did. So
well, it is the summer.
So for So for anybody who
traveling.
didn't, who sent one and I don't read it here, then my apologies. But let me know and I'll try to get it on a future episode.
Yeah.
All right, for Josh.
Josh.
Old wounds run deep. Gimli is then blinded twice by the cloth and lady.
Oh.
So this one kind of
Yeah, I was going to say, he kind of combined both chapters, too.
Yeah, which is fine.
Totally fine, because I did the same thing.
Yeah.
So Josh and I were the cool team today.
Yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm. Great minds.
Yes,
That's really
indeed.
good. Well done, Josh. And Rob. Thank you, guys.
Mm-hmm.
I love guest haikus.
Me too.
They make me happy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that wraps another episode.
It's a wrap.
Yeah.
All right. Blabbed long enough for one episode, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good blabbing.
So that's enough. See you guys next time.
We will see you guys next time. Yeah. Talk at you later.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye. Please remember to check out truemyths.org for show notes and plenty of other Tolkien goodness. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, would you please leave the Tolkien Road a rating and feedback on iTunes? It's a great way to support the show and takes less than a minute. We have a special interview lined up for our next episode, and it should be a lot of fun. Our discussion of Lord of the Rings will continue on July 23rd with Book 2, Chapter 7, The Mirror of Galadhrim. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, the road goes ever on.